Thanks, Lonnie, and thanks for all of you for being here. We are really thrilled to support the Cornerstone Initiative. It's such a fantastic effort, and we were very excited to highlight it at Purdue in some of our resources, and thrilled that it has become a national effort through the support of Teagle and also the National Endowment for Humanities. And so I wanted to share an outline of our workshop today, which I will post into the chat. And so this will give you kind of a sense of the conversation, and there'll be some links there that we'll use in having some interactive discussion as we go along. So, first, just so I'm Director of Undergraduate Initiatives at the National Humanities Alliance. I've been leading our research on humanities recruitment efforts since 2019, and we began that work in 2018. And we've been reaching out to faculty and administrators. We've done 2 national surveys to learn about the challenges that folks encounter in attracting undergraduates to the humanities and the strategies that they found to be successful in surmounting those challenges. So you'll see a link there at the top of the outline. It's to the research reports that have emerged out of that effort. And the juiciest report is, if you scroll down to the bottom, it's the strategies for recruiting students to the humanities, a comprehensive resource. This is where we really lay out the qualitative data of all the things we learned about that are working to attract more students to the humanities, and organize those into various categories. And there's a lot of models there. You can kind of read it as a menu of models, but that's not really our focus here today. Obviously, we have a model in Cornerstone that we're all working to implement and expand upon and adapt to your individual campuses. So the focus is not so much on the different initiatives that we point to, which may have goals that align or don't align with the goals of Cornerstone to varying degrees, but rather the strategies that the faculty and administrators who have led those initiatives have found to be really effective in launching their effort, in gaining buy-in from others on campus, and in sustaining their effort by getting support from both internal and external sources of funding. So I'm going to be using some examples and pointing to some examples as I go along here, examples that you can mostly find in that report. Some of them are also newer examples through our current phase of research. But again, the focus is on the strategies that are relevant to you as Cornerstone grantees for forwarding your own efforts on campus and getting buy-in from different constituents on campus to support the effort. So we're going to go through 3 sort of phases and think about 3 different groups on campus. We'll begin with garnering buy-in among faculty. We'll then move on to strategies for promoting your Cornerstone initiative to students and making the case for the value of humanities education more broadly. And finally, we'll talk about building partnerships with administrators and campus-based offices, admissions, advising, marketing and communications, career services, et cetera, who can help forward your initiative and raise awareness about it and get students excited about it. So we'll dive into faculty in just a moment here. I wanted to point to a sort of common strategy, which is kind of simple on the face of it, but more difficult in practice, that we're going to be returning to throughout the conversation, which is, whoever you're engaging, really forefronting their priorities and addressing their concerns as directly as you possibly can in the pitch that you're making to them of why they should get involved with Cornerstone, why they should support the initiative, and lend their assistance with their expertise and the help that they can afford to it. So we'll keep kind of coming back to that, and that will be a sort of focus and thinking about each of these groups on campus. Where are they coming from? How can you meet them where they are and really present this opportunity to support Cornerstone and be a part of it in ways that really make it really clear what's in it for them and how it helps them to succeed in their goals. So as Lonnie said, I really want to hear from each of you and your experiences as we're going through here. And so,
sorry.
Sorry. So at the beginning and the end of each section, there's opportunities for you to kind of offer your experiences. So first, we'll break out at the end of our discussion about faculty. But first, we're just going to take a moment with this Google Doc that is linked there at the top of part 1 in the outline. If you open that link, you'll see a prompt there. Apologize, it's a little confusing there. I have the groups listed, but really that's more relevant for the second part that we'll go through here. So I'm going to delete those real quick. And I'd like you to just jot down some thoughts to this question. So the question, what are some concerns and critiques you've heard from faculty colleagues in your efforts to enlist their support for your Cornerstone initiative? How have they varied among faculty within and outside the humanities? So in other words, what are the barriers to getting buy-in from your faculty colleagues?
So Scott, you're referring to step 1 in the Google outline, right? The workshop outline, and you want folks to click on this link, right, and enter their thoughts into the second Google Doc.
Exactly.
I'm realizing that we're a small enough group that maybe we could just, as you're filling in this form, maybe we can just do some quick, like a quick raise your hands to tell us what phase of the work you're in. So some of you I know are planning grantees. Can you just raise your hand so folks can see that, so your colleagues can see that? Okay. Some of you are in your first year of implementation. And some of you are in your second year of implementation. It's hard to see when all the thumbnails are flashing. Yeah, but I think, you're seeing that your colleagues, by and large, are really grappling with this issue of how do you launch your projects and make sure that you have a strong start right out the gate. So I know this question is on your minds, and we can talk through once you have a chance to put your reflections in the Google Doc that Scott has set up for us. I think we can start talking about your concerns about engaging faculty and how we might tackle them with strategies that NHA has identified from their research in the field.
Great. Thanks, Lonnie. And seeing some really great responses here. Seeing a lot of questions about how much work will be involved for faculty. A lot of questions about what's wrong with what we're doing now. Why do we need to change it? How does this differ from approaches we've taken in the past? Questions about incentives.
This is great. We've spilled onto 2 pages.
Yes.
Of comments, and all of this is, I think many of you are going to recognize that these are familiar concerns.
I'm seeing some interesting questions about the relationship between career pathways or skill building and how close reading of great texts connects with that in other faculty's mind. But then on the other hand, is Cornerstone itself, is this accommodating professional studies more than some faculty would like? So kind of questions from both sides there. A lot of staffing questions, initiative fatigue, I can understand that. and then how to accomplish writing instruction goals alongside teaching transformative text.
Yes. Hey, question.
Okay.
Cool.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm. Oh, okay. Course start.
All right. Let's make sure if we're not asking a question, let's try to have our mics off, because I am open to questions. If you have them and want to turn your mic on and ask a question, please feel free to do so, and go ahead and chime in. But yeah, this is really helpful for, this doc has been effective in getting a lot of these different issues on the table. Great. So, I'm gonna share some, and feel free to keep adding. This is something, it's an open doc, so it's something that we can all kind of continue to access and draw upon. But just to share some of the things that I thought about that we've learned from other initiatives that apply to Cornerstone in my mind. I saw the questions about, if I'm not being incentivized to do this, why should I do it? How much work is involved? Kind of the questions to that extent. And, we have found that successful first year initiatives, you have to address the bias that exists in higher ed towards, faculty often wanting to teach graduate students first, wanting to teach more advanced courses, smaller seminars, maybe being not as excited to teach gen ed classes, with, I think, some articulation of what an incredible opportunity it is to teach gen ed classes from a multiple perspectives. One, from a recruitment perspective, so faculty whose departments are struggling to attract students and majors, this is the best opportunity you're going to get to attract students who are not already interested in your discipline in the first year. It's an ideal opportunity to convert the skeptical, and the gen ed incentive that students have is obviously a big part of that in terms of bringing students in who wouldn't normally seek out this kind of an experience. And that it may be one for those who do not go on to, pick up a major or a minor in, humanities or social sciences, that this may be one of, of a small handful of experiences that they have in their college degree. So from an educational impact standpoint, even outside of the recruitment opportunity, it's a huge opportunity to really offer something of immense value to students. Nothing is going to be more important for their success than their ability to write, and that these transformative texts may make an impact on them that may take years for them to really realize how impactful it was, but something that can really make a difference in their lives. Now, to the question of workload and incentives, we've heard of really successful efforts that have leveraged grant funds to either lighten the load or offer some sort of incentive to participating faculty. So, to point to a couple of examples of this. So a first year program that was revitalized in a really powerful way at Davidson College, they were able to leverage the grant funds to tap juniors and seniors to serve as student mentors and help take on some of the grunt work of teaching the larger sections of the course, helping lead discussion sections, helping with tutoring student writing and research, and just bringing a lot of energy and sort of that peer cachet that this is a really cool endeavor and that these are powerful texts that you should be excited about the opportunity to read. And so that can be a way of really injecting energy in the program, but also lightening the workload if you're able to involve peer mentors in your program. Another example of that is, if there is some kind of incentive that can be offered for, that can be very small. We've seen very, very small incentives work in this, but for instance, the workshop in which faculty are taught how to implement the Cornerstone model, is there some way that time can be compensated for? Is there some room in the grant budget for doing that? And then even a little small incentive can go a very long way. But just as important as the incentive is actually the experience that is cultivated around implementation. So we've seen this at UMass Boston, which has a very successful initiative to implement, that has implemented dozens of gen ed courses, new gen ed courses that are on highly timely topics. They've been very successful in filling up and attracting a lot of students from outside of the humanities. And the part of how they were able to create a lot of energy around this was by forming faculty cohorts of 8 faculty who worked together to develop these new courses. And it created an opportunity that really recognized the value of pedagogy, where faculty, instead of kind of competing around research, were collaborating around pedagogy and reinforcing one another's sense that pedagogy is really important, and creating a space where it's recognized and valued and rewarded, and how that can help be a different sort of space than maybe what they experience in other aspects of the university and the way that reward structures are. Another thing we found to be really, getting to some of the career comments that were, people sharing the doc in terms of skepticism about like why engage these professional motivations so deeply, in terms of within the humanities. But also, on the other hand, those from maybe pre-professional faculty or STEM faculty who are skeptical of why invest in this instead of something else for first-year students, that the equity and empowerment arguments have been really effective. So, and this is where good evaluation comes in, which we'll have a workshop later in this series with other NHA staff to talk about how we do that and capture the impact of these programs. But we've seen time and time again that skeptical faculty can be persuaded by evidence that what you're offering is really valuable and empowering for students. And the equity angle is important as well, in the sense that, from maybe within the humanities in terms of the instrumentalization arguments, how preparing students for careers, given the fact that students may not come with some of the advantages that we have experienced, and that they may come into a university that carries a higher price tag than many of us may have paid for college when we were in college, and that those demand attention to those issues and support for students making connections between liberal studies and how it can help them in their careers. To turn it around to the other side of that equation, making the case to skeptical faculty who are skeptical of the value of humanities education, that using evaluation to demonstrate how, on a more existential level, how empowering transformational texts can be for them. And that this is something that for generations, for 150 years, there's been a debate in this country about who should have access to that kind of education. And there have been, times in our history where, it has been withheld from, working class folks, from people of color. And there's been a narrative about, that we should have 2 different kinds of higher education for people from different backgrounds. And so calling attention to that history and saying it's really important that we make transformational texts and humanities education available to all of our students, regardless of what it is that they're going to go on and major in. So we found that to be very persuasive in converting skeptical faculty. And then, a final principle has to do with autonomy. And, there's been all kinds of studies of workforce satisfaction across the board about how important autonomy is. And I saw some comments in the Google Doc to this effect, where, folks may be attached to what they've done in the past and maybe skeptical of why they're being asked to do something different. And so, key to securing not only a yes in terms of, yes, I will teach this course, but a real commitment yes and a real buy-in to the process is accommodating that sense of autonomy as much as you can. Obviously, we have a model that we believe in here that's very powerful, that we want to get folks on board with. But as much as you can, create opportunities for faculty to personalize their courses, to incorporate their most cherished pedagogical approaches into their course approach. I know that the way that the text lists work is, emphasizing the flexibility of that, and that, there's these texts that we think are really important and need to include. There's this much broader list you can draw from that you have power over your selection of. And then, asking, is there kind of, asking them when you encounter these kinds of critiques or questions, is there something you're concerned about? Is there a specific thing you don't want to do, or that you are skeptical of the pedagogical value of? And can we talk about that? Maybe have a conversation about it. And can you meet them there in accommodating their concern while also maintaining the integrity of the approach you're, that you are promoting here? And then, finally, the non-negotiable aspects of the curriculum, making them as easy to implement as possible. So really teeing up the parts of the curriculum that they must do and making it as easy for them to do as possible, as easy to implement as it possibly can. So those are just some broad principles that we've seen be really effective in different contexts in forwarding curricular initiatives. We're going to shift here to a breakout conversation, but I'm curious if folks have any questions for us. Lonnie, would you like to chime in?
Yeah, no, so we definitely would love to hear your questions and comments and reactions to what Scott has shared in terms of, like, does this seem something that's a feasible tactic for you to implement in your campus context? But I just wanted to quickly kind of add some reflections to what Scott was sharing. First, on this faculty autonomy piece, I think this is something that, depending on your campus context, I know certainly that it's something that you're thinking through in terms of how the use of common readings will work, specifically in your gateway course for your first year students. So I've put in the chat a link to the toolkit that we have for the Cornerstone Initiative that's updated annually. And if you look at the last section of the toolkit pages, I think it's something like pages 18 through 30, you're going to see a table that shows for each institution that's participating in the initiative, how they're kind of interpreting, creating a gateway in their campus context, and how they're interpreting creating a pathway through general education in their campus context. And you're going to see, for the gateway in particular, there are a variety of approaches to kind of maintain this balance between maintaining faculty autonomy while still having some cohesion in readings across sections of your gateway. Very, very few institutions have chosen to have a totally uniform syllabus across sections. It can work in some places, and honestly, the big sort of check mark for choosing to do that is because it becomes, if you can get faculty interested in a uniform syllabus, it makes the lift of teaching those texts much easier, because you can develop very robust teaching resources, study guides, discussion prompts, assignments, sort of other ways of engaging your students with a particular text, if that can be essentially developed collaboratively by faculty and then used in all the sections. But most places are not going to choose to do that. Most places will want to have a list of common readings and some guidelines for how that list is to be used as instructors develop their syllabi for the sections for which they're responsible for. But I just wanted to say that if you haven't taken a look at the toolkit, it might be useful for you to spend some time taking a look at what your peer institutions are doing. I also just wanted to comment a little bit about the point that Scott had raised about how teaching in general education is in the interest of your faculty colleagues, whether they know it or not. And this is especially true for faculty in the humanities. So there is a really interesting study that came out in the journal Educational Evaluation and Policy Analysis last year that showed that the type of engagement that first-year students have by faculty rank has implications for whether or not students will persist in that particular field. And so when you think about how first-year general education courses tend to be staffed by adjuncts, you can see why that will have really meaningful impacts on students' likelihood of persisting in that particular department. So you have a lot of students taking first-year humanities courses with adjuncts. As a practical matter, even if they have a positive experience, they're less likely to continue in the humanities simply because there are no more courses to take with that particular adjunct, right? That the adjunct usually doesn't have opportunities to teach other courses in the humanities at your institution. But there may be other reasons why students may not choose to persist. Adjunct faculty, for I think reasons that they cannot control, tend just to be less supported by institutions. They don't have a lot of resources to be able to spend time with faculty or to invest in their own teaching practice. And so when students just have less than positive experiences in the first year in that particular discipline, for reasons that may have nothing to do with their individual instructor, but to more systemic issues, it's just creating, I think, a cycle where students disengage from the humanities and do not consider taking more courses in the humanities. And so this is just a really practical thing to be really thinking about. How can the grant incentivize teaching in your chosen gateway course in a way that attracts tenure track faculty or teaching faculty who have regular appointments at your institution, such as a lecture type position. So I just wanted to make sure that's on your minds. There's some really wonderful comments that I see about concerns in the document that everyone has contributed to. And as part of sort of making the case to your faculty colleagues about why this is in your interest, including partly self-preservation, and how the grant in particular makes external resources available to at least partially address the lift that's involved when you're getting ready to teach in a new way. Even if the actual stipends are modest, depending on how your grant budget is configured, I do think it is important to acknowledge to faculty colleagues that this is work. And maybe the financial outlay isn't total compensation for the time involved. But I think even making the symbolic acknowledging in some form the work that's involved, I think it is important.
Thanks so much for folks taking notes on their discussions. I see a note about non-humanities faculty teaching cornerstone sections have concerns about, teaching this model. Something I spoke with Lonnie a little bit about before, and do see that as something that would be a challenge and require a kind of different sort of appeal, perhaps. Different sorts of misgivings, different sorts of challenges that folks need to appeal to. But I'm seeing a lot of comments on, that there's a widespread recognition of the need to increase student proficiency in reading, and that maybe that's part of the appeal that can be made to those faculty, and this being a great model for doing that. Great. Well, thank you all. Also, it was nice to hear it in the group I was in, just folks getting to know each other's programs and comparing the different structures that you all created under the umbrella of Cornerstone. And so great. Thanks so much. Well, we're short on time here, so we're going to move on to thinking a little bit about students and making the case to students. And I realize that some of you may not be at that phase as you're still designing your initiatives. But of course, all of you have experience making the case for the value of your instruction to students and know how challenging that can be in the current environment, especially. And so this has been a big focus of our project. So in the interest of time, I think I'm going to go ahead and save the sort of the jot down phase for the discussion at the end, so we can have a little more time for that. Folks seem to be enjoying that. You know, one of the things we learned through our research, which is probably of surprise to no one, but that there was a consensus from community colleges to elite R1s that concerns about job prospects are the #1 deterrent for students studying the humanities, focusing on the humanities in the undergraduate curriculum, picking up majors and or even minors. And some of the strategies that we've seen work really well in addressing those challenges, which are, you know, market wide, so to speak, that are national challenges, have to do with the way that humanities education is framed for a student population that may not have a deep familiarity with what it is exactly that you're offering. And so tapping into students' aspirations has been a key part of this. On campus have done it successfully, and collapsing the binaries between practical and impractical, pure and applied, pragmatic and idealistic, you know, framing the humanities as all of these things. That the best defense really is a good offense in this case, and it's easy to be defensive in the context of a lot of, you know, questions and a lot of, you know, viewing people as questioning the value of humanities education. But we know that what we have to offer is really powerful and really important for students on all kinds of levels. And so really articulating that message in a comprehensive way and not being afraid to go right at the career concerns and attack them early and often. Sometimes humanities faculty are concerned that in doing so, they'll diminish the sort of existential value of the humanities. But I don't think that's the case. I think that people understand that more readily than they understand how this will benefit them in their professional endeavors. And so some examples of how this has played out on different campuses. At Arizona State University, they did basically a market research type survey of students about what they thought the humanities were. And not surprisingly, their concept was somewhat vague in terms of how it mapped on to the disciplines and areas of studies and what those areas of studies entail. But they had a lot of positive associations. They had some questions about the practicality, but they had a lot of positive associations that align with their own values and their own aspirations to make positive change in the world. So they basically created a really compelling marketing campaign that met the students where they were in those perceptions, that tapped into those aspirations and kind of went there first and didn't presume a sort of deeper knowledge of the humanities and making their case for its value. You know, that's something that you can then advance in the classroom, right? Another example of kind of putting these together and collapsing these binaries comes from University of Nevada, Reno, where they had both a applied liberal arts initiative that connected the humanities to careers and encouraged all humanities departments to develop internship programs and supported them in doing that. And also an elevating humanity campaign that framed the value of the humanities for, you know, advancing the human race and for the ethical contributions of humanities study. And so sending kind of both messages at the same time. Another initiative that has kind of integrated that pitch from Virginia Tech is called Tech for Humanity. You know, obviously Virginia Tech, a tech school where a lot of students are studying engineering, a lot of students are studying computer science, and they've really done a successful job. Leader there, Sylvester Johnson, who's a phenomenal leader in the humanities, about framing the humanities as really forward-thinking and really integral and crucial for the stage of technological development that we're in, and needing humanists at the table to forward technological and technology in an ethical way. So, you know, some of these you may have, you know, the principle that how I would apply this to Cornerstone is, you know, Cornerstone in its original model, and I'm sure in the forms that you're adapting and implementing it, you know, there's both this experience of transformative text and close reading that is a fairly pure humanities experience. And then there's also the effort to apply and adapt and point the humanities towards various pre-professional programs and collaborate in order to do that. And so putting those two together in your promotion of, and really confidently articulating the value of both, and thinking about creative ways you can integrate your pitch for both the existential and reflective work that students will do, the hard skills they'll develop in terms of writing and reading, and how the Cornerstone Initiative will invite them to think about how they can apply these skills, the skill and knowledge in different professions. You know, humanities faculty often have a challenge stepping up to this work because they may feel, well, I've spent my entire career in the academy. I don't know how to speak to these career pathways with confidence, and you wanted to offer up some tools for doing that that we have developed. I've linked there in the outline. We have a toolkit of data-backed arguments for why studying the humanities is a great idea. A lot of these have to do with debunking the career concerns and making a really strong case for how actually the professional value of the humanities will increase in the 21st century with automation, with the job market transforming itself over and over again, with students having to adapt to these changes in the job market and needing a fundamental skill set that they can adapt in all kinds of different ways, challenging the notion that they can get a technical skill set in a 4-year undergraduate program that will last them for a 50, 60-year career. It's very questionable that that is a viable possibility even in this day and age. So the data really helps because a lot of the myths are, you know, they're not based in reality. And so that reality needs to be, they need to be confronted with the real reality of humanities majors having, you know, very average outcomes in terms of employment, in terms of earnings, and that average encapsulates both, you know, the fact that humanities majors who go on to be teachers and work in libraries and work, you know, in cultural organizations that are underfunded, who have fulfilling careers and are happy to do that, bring that average down. And so there's a lot of people who successfully pursue high earning careers with a humanities degree, who bring that average up, and that they have a choice to do either one, and they're both good options. So sending a positive message about what is contained in that, and that it certainly isn't that the case that humanities majors struggle mightily compared to their peers in other majors. But you know, replacing those myths takes also stories, and so you know, this happens on the campus level, and it very much encourage you know, this to be done at the local level. We also have a podcast called "What Are You Going to Do with That?" is seeking to do that on a national level, where students are talking about how valuable their undergraduate education in the humanities has been for their careers in a wide variety of fields. We've seen this work really well on individual campuses. Westchester University, the English department is one that I think of, where you know, they've tracked their alums' outcomes really carefully and touted their career paths. They've not only held career panels with alums, but recorded those and created like a library of, you know, over the years of different faculty who have gone on to different things that they can then trot those out. And it helps with the problem of how do you get students to actually come to the career panel event? Well, if you record it, you don't necessarily have to. You can send that to them afterwards. And then, you know, repeatedly sending students articles, messages, data that debunk these myths and help them see how important this is for their professional future, whatever it is they choose to pursue. Leveraging authorities from outside of the humanities is an important part of this. You know, in the toolkit and making those arguments about the future of work, we cite Deloitte, we cite the World Economic Forum, we cite, you know, authorities that are making this case for it's really about human skills. That's really what's going to separate people and forward their careers the most in this century. Similarly, NACE, the organization that represents career services staff, you know, pointing to their resources that say it's actually not about the major. The major is not a credential. It's about the skills that students gain, which obviously Cornerstone is really focused on developing those core reading and writing skills, and also the intercultural competencies and reflective capacities that come from reading great texts. So, you know, if you look at employer surveys, that's what employers, they value those things. They're really important across a wide variety of industries, and they float to the top of the skills that employers see as most important. Humanities faculty have had a lot of success simply just putting those skills, citing those sources, and putting those skills on their syllabi and saying, you will get these skills, which are widely valued through this course. So that's a comment on and an encouragement to not shy away from the career concerns in making your case for why Cornerstone and the Cornerstone certificate is a valuable thing for students to gain. Now, beyond that, just some outreach principles. Reaching out early and often with personalized outreach is something we've seen be really effective. As much as you can, make contact with students before they arrive on campus or very soon after they arrive on campus, and really try to communicate with them, reach out on a personal level. That can really make a huge difference, especially if you think carefully about who your student population is and calibrate your message accordingly. So those are just some kind of fundamental principles. And so we'll go into another breakout here on what opportunities you see for meeting students where they are in messaging, media that you might promote your Cornerstone initiative with, and outreach to students. So if you look in your outline there, it's at the bottom of section 2. There's another link to a discussion section. And I will...
Scott, before we go into the breakout, I just wanted to quickly comment on, I was just thinking about some of the interesting things that our grantees are doing to really sort of this issue of sort of meeting students where they are. Many of you, for those of you who are making the choice to develop a certificate, a general education certificate, that's the strategic way in which you're reaching students, engaging students without adding to time to degree, which is something that we know is especially salient for those who are in engineering majors, right? So that's a very practical consideration that you're keeping in mind, so that STEM faculty, see this certificate as like a valuable complement to these professionally oriented degrees that students are pursuing. The certificate is composed of courses that you want your students to take anyway as meeting general education distribution requirements, but now it's just a more cohesive experience, right? And so why not take that opportunity, if you're not already doing so, to articulate to your students how the skills that students are cultivating in the certificate courses are preparing them in ways that they may not recognize for their future career aspirations. Now, many of you are using, your Gateway course is a writing course. And I think they're really interesting concerns that you're raising that I've heard you've also speak about. When you're teaching a writing course, a skill building course, how do you also engage students around transformative text? And I think this is a really tough question, right? Part of it has to do with how writing is usually taught, right? In first year college courses. That doesn't necessarily leave a lot of time for reading. And yet it's impossible to become a strong writer until you strengthen your close reading skills. And so, I think this is an interesting conundrum. I mean, how do you do this so that you have the amount of time that the instructional time that you need just to help students strengthen their skills as writers, but use text as a subtext, essentially, to talk about writing. That's something that I think at a future workshop, perhaps, we should be really thinking through how, in practical ways, how do we do that? Because I just think this is a common issue for many of our grantees. But in terms of, to Scott's point, telling your students that you will tap out in your career trajectory if you do not have strong writing skills. I mean, that's just sort of the reality. Like, you will not be able to move into senior roles unless you have strong writing and other communication skills. And you why not take the opportunity in college to really build that foundation that's going to be crucial for your future career success. I mean, I think that's just a very practical message that you could share with your students. particularly because it's something sort of given the realities of, often remote or hybrid work arrangements, right? I mean, writing skills are just going to be really fundamental. I think even more so than what we're already seeing. But one of the concerns I also wanted to make sure that we sort of touch on explicitly in our time together, and perhaps as part of our breakout discussion, we can also discuss further. One of the concerns that I see you're expressing in here that's related to writing has to do with, how do we engage students with transformative text as part of creating a common experience when we may not necessarily have a lot of confidence in students' level of preparation. I think this is just something that many institutions are really struggling with. Students have differing levels of academic preparation depending on the quality of their K-12 schooling experience. And there are real inequities as part of this. And so, I think strengthening writing, strengthening close reading skills, it's a way of addressing equity in higher education. Students who develop close reading and writing skills are just more likely to be successful in college for reasons that I think are readily apparent the moment you think about it. And it's a way to redress just inequitable schooling experiences prior to their arrival at college. We have seen grantees teach the Gateway course in a way that's inclusive of students regardless of their level of preparation. If you think of the Gateway as an opportunity for students to feel confident in college and to develop the skills to be successful college students, rather than sort of treating it like a traditional upper level humanities course where you are trying to meet a particular set of learning objectives for your major. That shift in mindset, it could make the class a more welcoming experience for your students while also kind of broaden the cohort of faculty who could, that you could engage to teach the course. And so, I just wanted to make sure that I raised that as an issue that I know many of you are struggling with, and that could be part of how we think about student outreach.
Thanks, everybody. I hope you all had a nice time in your discussion groups. I certainly did, and heard a lot of different situations in terms of who the student population is, how the gen ed requirements work on different campuses, and how that impacts the question of getting buy-in from students. So I'm sure that probably came up in other groups as well. Also heard some thoughts about advisors and things that lead into our next topic. And so let's go ahead and move into that. And I think we do have enough time here. There was some overlap between the prompt at the beginning of the last section and the discussion at the end, so I kind of collapsed it. But let's go ahead and take a minute. Actually, we'll use the doc. Let's use the doc that's linked. Sorry about this. At the top of part 2, and I'm gonna use that instead for this question here about. So I'd like you to take a moment and to jot down campus-based offices you've reached out to. What I have in mind here again is I'm thinking about advisors, I'm thinking about admissions, I'm thinking about marketing and communications offices, I'm thinking about career services potentially. And administrators are something we're all going to have as a common theme here to talk about as well in this section. But I'm curious, who you have seen. Maybe it's institutional research is another one to think about. Who you have seen as somebody who can help raise awareness about your Cornerstone initiative. It can help provide expertise to support it. and help it succeed. So I'm going to share some examples of how that's worked on other campuses, but I'd love for folks to take a moment in this doc, and I'll share it in the chat just for simplicity's sake as well, since the wires got crossed a little bit there. And love to hear folks jot down examples of, folks on campus you've reached out to and tried to collaborate with to forward your initiative and help get it off the ground.
I don't know why, but I'm getting a refused access on that.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry, I must have, I apologize. I'm going to fix that.
Me too.
Apologies. Okay, everyone should be good now. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
This is great, seeing a lot of really extensive outreach that you've all been doing, which is really wonderful and encouraging to see. And yeah, I'm seeing some others that, I didn't mention: registrar, student health and wellness, residential life, diversity, equity, inclusion, obviously an important one, student success offices. These are all really great examples of different units on campus that can help make an initiative like Cornerstone succeed. I'm going to cite some examples here in a moment, and yeah, and I'm seeing some comments here like marketing, making a website is very helpful. Absolutely. Website and video, others referencing that. So yeah, I'm going to cite some examples that kind of align with that, and some principles that folks have found to be really helpful in reaching out to these different offices. So, first, obviously, administration, upper administration, a lot of people read about engaging the dean's office. Hugely important, of course. And one thing we've heard again and again from some really successful initiatives that have gotten a lot of support from upper administration is they've said, we've really made an effort to persuade them that we're part of the solution to the problems as they see it. And so appealing to their needs, their concerns to secure support. And, it's a lot of that is just about how something is presented or language, that it's not, framed in self-serving terms, which we all have. We all have needs, of course, in terms of seeking that support, but really framing it as aligning with their vision. So some examples of this in practice: Otterbein University is a university, a small liberal arts college in Ohio that had some humanities programs on the chopping block, and programs were being threatened to be closed. And the humanities faculty were able to come together and come up with a 5-year plan. We worked with them on this a little bit. And so they basically were able to point to things that had worked on other campuses, prepare plans for how they would implement that in Otterbein, and explain how they were going to grow enrollments and attract more students to programs that were having a hard time doing that. And it completely shifted the conversation, completely shifted the pendulum from chopping block to support for and seed money for these initiatives to help grow these programs. And we've heard this also, in less dire circumstances, like the history department at James Madison University, which has been growing fairly rapid clip during the pandemic. And one of the ways they've done that is, as we all know, there's been a lot of administration turnover in the pandemic, as we can all understand why. And that, some new administrators were hired, new dean was hired, new provost was hired, and the history department was ready with, some ambitious plans that fit with their vision, with these new administrators' goals, their vision, their ideals. A lot of it had to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how these things were going to help achieve the goals from the dean's office perspective, from the provost's office perspective. And, and again, presenting those in non-self-serving ways. And they've been able to get a lot of resources to support those initiatives, and they've been able to replace their retiring faculty with new hires. So, this is just a really key principle, I think, and it also applies when thinking about partnering with other schools on campus. So some of the more successful programs that have done this, the Public and Applied Humanities program at the University of Arizona, which has 7 different tracks based on partnerships with pre-professional schools on campus. So what they, found was really key to building these partnerships was creating a credit sharing structure and a cost sharing structure, and the rewards. This is an RCM context, so there's a whole setup there for that, where really listening very carefully to what the concerns of the other deans were and what their incentives were, and how to create a structure where everybody feels like this is benefiting them and it's mutually beneficial. And that also applies to kind of softer sells like the Water and Central Eurasia program at Pitt, where they were trying to solicit buy-in from the engineering faculty and the business school to promote these courses which integrate history and language learning and learning about the cultures of Central Eurasia with engineering and business. And so, everything from how the courses were scheduled to the way that they were promoted to students, really listening carefully and calibrating the opportunities so that it really seemed like a mutually beneficial option, and something that the dean of the engineering school and the dean of the business school was wanted to promote to their faculty. This is obviously a part of the Purdue Cornerstone success story as well. So that's a couple of kind of administrative examples. Thinking about other offices, again, it's the spirit of mutually supporting one another. And so, we can get locked into adversarial thinking about this, but in reality, humanities faculty can help many of these folks do their jobs better, and vice versa. They have expertise that can help humanities faculty, do our jobs better and promote what we have to offer more effectively to students. So for example, the Colby Humanities Center created some really compelling videos that sort of depicted the big ideas they were trying to get across through their annual theme programming, through their environmental humanities program. And they partnered with the admissions department to blast that out to prospective students, which the admissions department wanted. They wanted shiny content like that to be able to share out. And so it helped them do their job better. Similarly, at Ball State University, the English department produced a lot of content that the marketing and communications office could use, which they needed. They needed content, right? So they need to run articles in the magazine. And so because the English department was the squeaky wheel, they got the grease, they got articles run about how valuable an English degree is for a wide variety of careers, countering some of those myths that are out in the culture. We've seen this work with advisors as well, where, for instance, the University of Oklahoma, there was a really effective effort in the history department led by the advisor there, where they basically got support for recruiting students who were into the history major, who were not doing well in the engineering majors, were not doing well in business majors, were taking history electives and succeeding in them. So from a retention and student success perspective, they were able to get support for the idea that, let's promote the idea to these students that they can become history majors, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's going to be great for them. So, thinking carefully about what the motives and concerns are of these different offices, and, presenting opportunities that really work for you both. Some examples of the expertise that they can bring that can really help an initiative like Cornerstone succeed. So the first year humanities sequence at Dartmouth College had declined, along with humanities enrollment across the board, a great deal. And so the associate dean, Barbara Will, she partnered with admissions and marketing to create a brochure to send to incoming students to promote this first year experience. And, in doing so, it was something that, the admissions and marketing were, again, happy to have something to promote. And all of a sudden they had more spots than they could, had more students than they could fill in their spots. They had to turn away students from this program because the interest increased so much by getting the word out that way. We've seen similar principles at work with career services, where it's in humanities faculty interest to actually encourage students to go see career services. It really is, to help them have stronger postgraduate outcomes. And it's in career services interest to have students come to them. And so creating programs like the Humanities Works program at Miami of Ohio, where getting career services together with humanities faculty, improving the materials that promote the career value of humanities, and also getting those students to come and get help with internships, get help with resume writing, all the things that can help them succeed post-graduation. And then a final kind of note here is that, like, these offices often have, authority that they can back up the messages that you're sending and make them all the more persuasive. So at UNC Greensboro, the liberal arts advantage, the career services worked with the faculty across the liberal arts, not just the humanities, to create these workshops that made the case for why a liberal arts education is a huge advantage on the job market. And they use their network to tap employers to come join these events. So employers are also lending their voice to this message. And you have faculty, career services, and employers in the same room, reinforcing the same message that studying these subjects is really beneficial for your career. Similarly, the principles are a little bit trickier and maybe a little bit more personal in terms of when we talk about institutional research or the enrollment management office or student success. But the basic principle is the same, where, listening really carefully to them, reading their own mission statement, thinking and listening and reading really carefully about what it is that they're trying to accomplish and what is important for them in terms of their success being measured, and what their outputs are, and how, what counts as success for them, and how could they succeed more with humanities students on your campus, and how could you leverage those motivations to get their help with what you need, and get their expertise to support what you're doing with your Cornerstone initiative.
Scott,
any thoughts or questions or examples of maybe how that comes into practice, or Lonnie, if you want to kind of elaborate, that's great too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these are all just really practical ways to engage different campus offices, including some offices that maybe, haven't been on your radar so far. I've been thinking a lot about one of the concerns I saw in the Google Docs around academic advisors, and how sometimes, as important as they are, particularly at large institutions, because they play such an influential role at the course registration level. When they're skeptical about the value of the humanities, what a roadblock that can be for student engagement. So I just wanted to share a story about Austin Community College. So for those of you who've been to Austin, you know that they have a breakfast taco culture. And one of the things that they did, so, Austin Community College is a Hispanic serving institution, and their gateway course, which they call the Great Question Seminar, it's a student success course that also engages students with transformative texts. And there was a lot of skepticism among the academic advisors about this particular approach to a student success course, right? They were worried that students, given their level of preparation, would find that sort of like an academically and culturally alienating experience. And so the project leaders, they had the breakfast taco truck come to campus just for the academic advisors, right? That was sort of the reason why people wanted to come. But the purpose was to hear from students who had a really powerful experience in the seminar. And what these texts meant for them as a Latino student, as a Black student, as a student from a low-income background, and how it's really shaped their, what they want to be pursuing as a student at Austin Community College. I mean, the students essentially were the best ambassadors for the value of this type of experience. And they persuaded the academic advisors about why this is something that, right, they want to promote with more of their advisees. And so, I think that's also something I've heard Melinda Zook of Purdue talk about, that student advisors with, having student ambassadors in sessions with academic advisors, how important that is to show them that this is something that students really value and that it helps with their success on campus, right? I mean, particularly, to Scott's point, academic advisors, in my experience, really see themselves as advocates for student success, right? They're very invested in students being successful in the campus. And when you show that, your Gateway course, it's building community for students, it's helping them it's laying the foundation for them to have a successful college career and beyond, that can be really powerful for that constituency. I know that, Cheryl, not to, in our last 2 minutes together, I was just thinking about something that you've done with your Guardians of the Humanities fair that maybe you can quickly comment on.
Yes, one of the projects, in fact, this was what Michelle Ramsey did in her class, which is HUM 102. It's the second of the course sequence that we offer at Penn State Berks for the Keystone Certificate. And their final project was a carnival event themed around superheroes. And so we made T-shirts. Each student had a booth dedicated to educating other students about different aspects of the humanities that they focused on from based on the projects that they were doing in that class. So Michelle might be able to speak a little more with a little more detail as to what those projects were about. But it was a great event, well attended, and yeah.
Phenomenal. Student ambassadors, hugely important. Always great to get student voices in there, and on the point of advisors too, I think a lot of what we talked about with careers, they are really much of an audience for that stuff too. Another kind of a successful advisor example is from the University of Oregon, where they distributed the careers for history majors pamphlet that the American Historical Association created to all the advisors, and just said, like, look, this works. This is actually a good path. You don't need to sort of feel qualms about guiding students or letting students pursue this degree. They're going to be fine. So yeah, absolutely. Advisors crucial. Well, I see we're at 2 o'clock. Thank you all so much. I'll let Lonnie close this up, but it was really great to hear about all your initiatives. Thanks so much for all the great participation. I loved reading all the comments, and really appreciate y'all being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. I love the insights that you've shared in these Google Docs. I think that there's a lot actually I'm thinking about how we can use it in terms of strengthening, for example, our own resources like our toolkit. So thanks for your input. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of you next month at the Faculty Institute we're going to have at Purdue. And then I will follow up for our next 2 workshops facilitated by National Humanities Alliance in February and April of the spring semester next year. Thanks again.